Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle Tech Talk series. Today we'll be going through our IPsec VPN application, including the different integration options with L2TP, XAUTH, how to create VPN tunnels from site to site, setting up the different advanced options, and comparing IPsec VPN to OpenVPN applications. My name is Shannon Miles. I'm part of the product marketing team here, and I'll be your host today. I have with us John Coffin. He's our director of QA, been here for a very long time, and he will be demonstrating this application and, of course, answering any questions along the way. So just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. If you do have any audio issues, please be sure you are selecting the correct audio preference on the right-hand side. If you do select to use a phone, you will need to dial in and provide the access code. Just a reminder, this is a common question that comes up. This webinar is being recorded, and we will share that link 24 hours after this webinar has ended. It will be posted on the Untangle YouTube channel where all of our webinars recorded. So you're able to watch them at your own convenience or share them with anyone that wishes to watch them. And as always, we have a couple members on hand to help answer questions throughout this presentation. So if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right-hand side. And if we don't get to your question, or if you have a very specific question about your network setup, you can always email us at sales@untangle.com or support@untangle.com. Now, before I pass this over to John, I want to reiterate that this is a highly technical webinar. So if you are not familiar with Untangle or our networking solutions, NG Firewall, I would suggest you take a look at our 101 webinar series. They cover more higher level topics than this very technical webinar. So you can always get a list of our upcoming webinars on our website. We do about 2 a month, so keep an eye out for those. And with that, I will pass it over to John.
Thanks, Shannon. Today, as we said, we're going to go over the IPsec VPN and just kind of go over brief what's VPN, how can I use it. Basically, VPN is a way to make a private tunnel through the internet so you can transfer your own data and have access to other remote servers without having any kind of people looking into your traffic and seeing what your files are. There's 2 types really of VPN. There's what's called site-to-site, where you're trying to connect 2 different networks. In this case, it's a branch office A and a branch office B together. So people at both sides of it can access information from either office. The other type of VPN is where you have a mobile user, and they are they're connecting to networks that are not privy to your work or IT, and they have to be able to connect to their office and connect through a private connection so they can access the files directly. We call them mobile users, or sometimes known as road warriors. Just basically people on the road, and they have to connect to the office to access resources or even their email. So let's get into on how do we set these up. As you know, there's really 2 types of VPN on Untangle. There's IPsec, which we're going to go over today, and I just want to briefly cover over the differences with OpenVPN. That's also one of the apps on the Untangle. Some of the advantages of using L2TP over OpenVPN is that IPsec L2TP is actually built-in client to most OSs. In fact, I can't think of one that doesn't have it. Whether you have Android, iPhones, Windows, Macs, Linux machines, they all have a built-in L2TP client so they can connect. So there's no software to install on people's laptops and so forth. And it's kind of useful if maybe some of the users are remote and you're not able to access those directly. Sometimes it's easier to give people instructions on how to use some built-in applications rather than have them install an app like OpenVPN. one of the differences. OpenVPN in general uses TCP to connect. It's a more reliable way of connecting. OpenVPN generally uses UDP, which is easier to go through firewalls that you might not have control over, but it tends to be a little more sporadic in the connection. And then also OpenVPN has a lot of ability to connect across restricted firewalls because you can change the port, you can change the type of protocol you're using, multiple things you can change to get across firewalls that you might not have control over. Well, IPsec, it's a very defined port that it works on, and it's also using TCP, which is easier to block. Some of the caveats for L2TP, you can't have two remote users on the same network connecting. For example, if you have two employees at the same Starbucks and they're trying to connect to the L2TP, only one will be able to connect. Once the other one connects, it won't be able to connect through that same untangle. So the networks have to be different. What you can do is switch to XAUTH, which is actually a default on Windows 10. That allows you to connect multiple boxes that are on the same local network that's using the same IP. So in other words, you get two people at Starbucks, they both can connect if they're using XAUTH. OpenVPN doesn't have those issues because everyone's a private user, so it's a little more flexible in what they can. So just some of the differences there. So let's get into IPsec. Creating an IPsec tunnel for site-to-site. So you have two remote offices. They both need to connect to each other. The easiest way to do that is just create a site-to-site OpenVPN tunnel. And it allows you to do, if you have multiple networks on each side, you're able to configure those areas by some of the settings. And let's go into how to set that up. So I have two untangles set up. They're both on separate networks, and I need to connect them here. I have untangle A, and then I have untangle B. So I'll go ahead and configure this. So I'll go to my IPsec tunnel, and what I'll do is go ahead and fill in the information. I'm just going to say this is from A to B. It's going to be a tunnel. I'm going to go ahead and just use IK1 for now. I'll explain some of the differences between some of these settings in a little bit in the future. So I'm going to use my external IP. The remote IP in this case is let's see, and that is 81. And the identifier, usually I just use the external IP, so in this case it's 182. I'll just leave it blank because the default is the external IP. And then we have our local network, and I actually don't know what I set up the local network to be here over here. So I need to quick look, and it's 20. So I'll go ahead and just copy this, paste it over here, change my IP range, and we're going to do a shared secret. So I'm going to go my super password. Definitely make this as complicated as you can. You don't want to make it too easy for people to guess your password here. So I have to go ahead and set this up. Now I need to set up the other entangle. So I'll hop over to the other entangle, go to my IPsec, configure a tunnel. So I'm going to add a new tunnel. I'm going to say from B to A. Doesn't really matter what you call it. Again, I'm going to use my external, and then I'm going to put in my IP of my other box. and I'm going to go ahead and put the LAN address of the other box. And we need to put the same password on the two. So I'll go ahead and just copy that over. So we should be ready. So I'll go ahead and save these. Save it on the other side. And let's take a look. If we do a refresh. So you can see we have now a VPN tunnel between the two locations. So if I go to my status of 1, it says the status is active and how many bytes are going across that. If I go to B and I go to the status window, it shows it's also connected. And of course I currently don't have any traffic. This means anyone on either end of this VPN tunnel, at either end of the entangles, can access the resources on the other end. And that'll be a quick way that you can give access to the boxes on both sides of two remote offices. And of course, this would be going over the internet, and all your traffic is encrypted, so it's safe and secure. Let's go over some of the options that we have on the tunnel. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to copy it. So some of the options. If you have multiple networks on your LAN behind your remote network, you probably want to use I2. I2 allows you to use multiple networks. In this case, let's say I have multiple networks on the other end. I can go ahead and just add those extras as commas. And now I can have multiple networks connect across that network by switching to I2 and then just adding the remote networks. I also have to do the same thing on the other side. So I would go ahead and change this one to I2 and then add my other remote network that I have. So now I have two local networks here, and on the other end, I say these are the remote networks, and I have multiple networks. So I'm able to route multiple networks over the same tunnel. Before, you actually had to create separate tunnels for each of the remote networks that were on there, and now you can do it all in one tunnel. Some of the other things you can do, if you want to increase the security on your tunnel, you can go ahead and up this to maybe a 256-bit compression. You can change this to a different hash. There's all kinds of settings. Just remember, whatever phase 1 and phase 2 setting modifications you make this, you need to do that same modification to the other end. So I would have to go over here and make those same changes in order to get the tunnel to work on both ends. Couple other things that you can do. Once you have that network set up, you can decide whether to bypass all the traffic from your filtering. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes it's not. You really have to decide. Some people want to identify their traffic, so if you want to use captive portal on these foreign connections from the remote network, you should really not check the bypass, so you can use captive portal, for example, to identify that traffic. It really depends on what you want to do. And again, the status will show you what networks are connected, what remote networks are set, and so forth. You can also go to reports and see the status of some of your networks. We don't have any traffic across it, so it's okay. Let's see here. So since we don't have any traffic, it's not very exciting on it right now. But really, that, in the short of it, is how to build a VPN tunnel between two remote networks. Super easy, just need to enter the information. What I recommend is getting real basic network tunnel working between them, and then build on that. You know, if you want to increase the encryption, if you want to add multiple networks, add that after you've just established a really basic network on it. So the other part of IPsec is the ability for remote users who are not in an office that you control to be able to connect that. And that's really part of the L2TP XAUTH connection way. And what you'll do is these are all pre-configured. You can change the address pool. The key is this address pool must be different than OpenVPN address pool and any local networks. So you want to have this as a distinct network that you have. Again, we'll use an IPsec secret password right here. So there's two ways to identify the users that are logging in. You can use the local directory, which is built into Untangle, and I'll go over that real quick. So what you want to do, I've already created one, is you can add a login for the person. An email, and then you can create their password. Hopefully you make it complex. Don't make it 4 digits like I just did. So that creates a login for that person, and you can save that out. So I just created 2 remote users are able now to log in once I give them the information and how to configure their particular OS that they're using. You can also do Radius. If you have a Radius server, you can have it where it just automatically uses Radius, and it's that'll give you some accounting and so forth that is separate on the accounting. So if you have a Radius server, it's a great way to manage all your logins, especially if you have a large like Salesforce that's out there using multiple networks, and you need to keep track of who's logging in who. In this case, we'll just use the local directory just to make it easy. So I'll go ahead and save that. And I'll show you how easy it is to configure a Windows box, for example. So here I have a Windows box, and I'll go ahead and configure L2TP on there. So I'll go ahead and click on, I want a new network, which is a VPN connection. I'll say connect to a workplace. And I'm going to use my internet connection. So I'm going to type in the address of this is the external IP of the Untangle. And just to make things simple, I'm actually going to use the same name for the actual name. Use the IP for the name. So you don't want to connect now because there's some changes that you have to make after you configure the initial part. So I'm going to put in my username and the password that was given to me by my IT. And I'm going to go ahead and have that remembered. So now I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to that, because the defaults for Windows does not work correctly. So first thing for security, I'm going to go ahead and change that to L2TP. And I'm going to use a pre-shared authentication key. So in this case, it's going to be, as you notice, this is the same password as over here in my IP secret. So I'll go ahead and put that in, and then we're good to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect. And there's 2 ways to connect. The easiest way is right down here. And you can just click connect. And I've already got the password in there, so I'll just connect. Now I'm going to go look at it. So as you can see, Windows says, oh, okay, you're connected to the office now. So I'll go ahead and go to my Untangle. I'll see that I am connected. Here I am, right here. I'm connected, and how much time I've used. Really simple to use. Mac has it built in. Same thing for Android and iPhones. It's all built in. You just got to put that information in there, and you're ready to go. So really simple to use. It's really pretty straightforward. Let's go back. So we went to creating tunnels, the L2TP and XAUTH. XAUTH is exactly the same, except some built-in IPsec systems also give you the opportunity to use XAUTH. The Macs use XAUTH. It does have some advantages, the way you can connect and have multiple things that we went over earlier. For IPsec configuration, it's exactly the same. There's no differences in the configuration. And you can have a mix of L2TP and XAUTH remote PCs. It works exactly the same. I did go over some of the caveats that if you're using L2TP, you can't have two remote users on the same remote network. Otherwise, it'll log one person out. That's why I recommend using XAUTH if you can. Windows 10 has XAUTH, Mac OS has XAUTH, and I believe the newer iPhones and Androids, I know the Androids do, have the option for XAUTH. Part of this VPN, I just thought, since we're going to be have some new features coming out in 13, is we have a new feature coming out, which is going to be Tunnel VPN, which allows you to subscribe to a VPN host that allows you to connect and actually hide your traffic from your ISP. You can connect to a remote VPN, and all your traffic, or some of your traffic, can go there. It's a new feature for 13.1 that will be coming out soon. If you're really interested in trying this out, we do have a beta posted on the forums. If you want to try that out, again, you want to just try that. I wouldn't put that in production yet because it's only a beta, but the release should be soon. What you can do is sign up for various ISPs, and we have a whole list of people that you can sign up for. You can also create another Untangle to connect to if you want all your traffic to go out through some remote location or something like that. So it's something pretty useful. We'll definitely have more on this. We'll probably have a whole tech talk just on this. Just thought I'd give you a preview. Shannon, do we have any questions?
Yes, tons of questions coming in. Most are very specific to people's environment. So if you do have a specific question about your setup, please contact us at support@untangle.com. We can't really help you from a webinar standpoint. There were some questions about if IPsec is a free app or a paid app, so I don't know if you want to touch on that quickly, John.
Yeah, so OpenVPN and Tunnel VPN, which is coming out, is a free app. IPsec is a paid app, so you will need a subscription. It does come part of the complete package. So for those that have the complete, you already have a license for it. One thing I was going to touch it, if you do have very specific IPsec questions, post them to the forums. I have to say, Untangle is one of the few people that if you post things in the forum, you actually are going to have answers from the engineers that work on it. So it's one of the key benefits of being with Untangle. It's like you have direct access to the developers through the forums. So push your questions there. Definitely we can help it. If you have complicated networks, please post a network diagram. It does help us debug the problems on the forum.
Great, thanks, John. There was one question. I know you kind of touched briefly on the difference between IPsec and OpenVPN, but someone wanted a little bit more of a security point of view, pros and cons.
Really, from a security aspect, I could not see very much difference. I mean, they all have minor instances of levels of security. I would say they're pretty well equal. I don't. The nice thing about IPsec, they are built into the OS. some people really do not like installing third-party apps. I totally understand that, and personally, I use IPsec on my phones and so forth because I don't like installing apps on them. That's the reason why I use IPsec. There's nothing wrong with OpenVPN. For the Mac, for example, you have to install an app called TunnelBrick, and that allows you to use OpenVPN connections. So it's not the easiest thing, but really, once you have them set up security-wise, there's really no differences. The level of security. I will say one thing on OpenVPN: if you have been running OpenVPN on Untangle for a while, you should really consider uninstalling it and reinstalling it. The reason is we initially, especially if you go back to early 10.0, we had a lower form of certificate. The newer VPN, there's really nothing new. It's just when you install it, it updates it creates a stronger certificate for connection between your clients and the OpenVPN server. So it does give you a better certificate. The reason we don't change the certificate on upgrade, any user who is currently using it remotely, if we were to upgrade the certificate, they could not connect because their certificate would not match. So when you do uninstall and reinstall the OpenVPN, you have to regenerate all the users and distribute the OVA files and certificate files. So it's something to recognize. IPsec, you can actually change it on the fly as you go along. So you just have to change both ends of the tunnel when you do that.
There's a couple other questions coming in. There's a question if using Untangle hardware is recommended for IPsec to work, or if other firewalls will work as well.
It's easier just because you're looking at two setting files on both ends. We have lots of customers who are using Untangle IPsec with various third-party firewalls with IPsec. IPsec is really a standard. The problem is everyone calls their settings a little bit differently, and sometimes trying to match it is quite difficult. So if it's your first time using it, I really recommend putting Untangle on both ends. If you're more experienced and you really don't mind trying to figure out, what does Juniper call, remote identifier? Who knows? So it's always kind of difficult to get those settings to match up. There is a lot of help on the forums from people who have successfully connected IPsec to various boxes and how to match up the names. So that's really the long and short of it.
Great. There's an interesting question. Someone wants to know about limiting traffic in and out of the Untangle side. Said if I have a remote network connected via VPN, but I want to limit traffic to a few certain ports.
You want to limit ports going into your box, or?
It says limiting the traffic allowed in and out on the Untangle side.
Yeah, I mean, you could. The great thing about Untangle is that the apps all work together because they use common identifiers. So, for example, one of the things you could do, this is as long as you have, you can restrict that as long as you have this bypass turned off. So you don't want that bypass on. So what you would do is just go ahead and use a firewall app. And then you can just create a rule that you could say source interface, and in this case I would select the IPsec, or if you want to limit like users and so forth, or the XAUTH, you can go ahead and limit those, and then you could restrict that with various what you would do is a pass rule at the top, and then a block all at the bottom rule at the bottom. So I would say, for example, let's say I don't want them. Let's say It's okay for them to go to port 80, so I would say port 80 here. And I would say pass, and I'll give a description. And then I would create another rule, which is my test block. And then I would just, again, same source interface. And I would just do a block on that. Because the way this works is the rules work top down. So the first rule to match is the one executed. So if they're going out of port 80 in this example, they'll pass. But if they're trying to go, it won't match on this one, so I'll go to the next rule. And this one just cares that it's the interface is L2TP, and that'll be blocked.
Okay, just a few more questions. Can IPsec be configured for dynamic IP?
So the short answer is yes. Yes, you can do that. The problem is when your IP changes, you won't. The connection will go down, of course, because the IPs. So you will need to change the IPs on both sides. Another way around this is you can actually use. Let's see. You can actually use qualified host names in the tunnels. And that works because it's able to connect on the remote by looking up that IP. And if you have something like dynamic DNS, it will change the IP as it goes. So there is a little bit of downtime, of course, because it takes time for the dynamic IP to change on your DNS server, and then the other server has to in turn get the new IP address from that. So it does work. I personally use it on my Comcast at home because my IP address almost never changes. So I actually have the IP address hard-coded. But there are some difficulties. You can use it, but you know there's some hands-on manual work that you have to do.
Great, thanks, John. I think that's about it. As I mentioned, if you have specific network setup questions, the forums, as John mentioned, or support@untangle.com would be your best bet right now.
Yeah, so one thing I was going to say, I can't emphasize more, use the session viewer. It will show your LTD traffic. You can use the log file. I don't think I went over that part. So the log file is really useful. If you have problems connecting to, try to copy and paste the relevant areas of this log to the forums. It does help us debug the problem.
Great, thanks, John. So if this was really confusing to you, we do offer professional services. They can help you install, configure, set up your network, upgrade. We do everything. As John mentioned, there are our actual engineers that work on the product, so they are completely aware of everything that it can do. So if you are interested in that, you can give us a call or contact us at sales@untangle.com. And I know some other questions are coming in. We already went over the comparisons between IPsec and OpenVPN. If you want more information, please contact us at sales@untangle.com. We'd be glad to go over that with you. We have a bunch of resources. As John mentioned, we have the forums. It's an open community where you, as well as our engineers, go on and ask questions, answer questions. Other people, our customers, help each other in terms of their network setups or troubleshooting. We also have a wiki. That is our technical documentation. So for kind of technical setup questions or some configuration, that's where you're going to go. And as always, we're here, email sales@untangle.com, support@untangle.com, or call us. Let's see, we have some webinars coming up. John did mention a new app feature coming out. That'll be coming out shortly. We're very excited, so stay tuned for notification of that. Our next Tech Talk is on September 7th after Labor Day around Command Center. Command Center is our new offering. It's a cloud centralized management solution. We released it a little while ago, but because it's in the cloud, we can push out new features without requiring anyone to do physical upgrades. So we have some new features that we're excited to announce about those. So if you are interested in that, you can register for that. And then in October, we have a 101, which I mentioned is a very higher level webinar around our state offering for state and local governments. So if I didn't get to your question, I do apologize. We are here to help. So we hope to see you next time, and thank you so much, John, for the great demonstration, and everyone have a wonderful rest of the week.